talking about the reasons why I believe the Pistons need to re-sign Frank Jackson. So when you look at the point guards on the Pistons roster currently, we have Killian Hayes, Saban Lee, Dennis Smith Jr., Frank Jackson, and possibly Cade Cunningham if we get the first overall pick in the draft. Now, Killian Hayes and Saban Lee, both contracts are guaranteed right now. We just got them on the rookie deal. But it's different with Dennis Smith Jr. and it's different with Frank Jackson. So when you look at Dennis Smith Jr.'s contract, we have a team option on him. So if you don't know what that means, basically this offseason, the Pistons have the choice to whether or not we want to bring him back or not to bring him back. Now, Frank Jackson, on the other hand, is a unrestricted free agent. And that means that the Pistons don't have any clause to bring him back. If Frank wants to go, he can go. If he wants to stay, he can stay. But the Pistons have no real say in the matter. So we have 4 point guards, 2 locked up on contracts, and then we have 2 who may or may not be on the roster in the future. And we need to decide which one between the 2 of these guys we should bring back. And as you've seen in the title of this video, I said we need to bring back Frank Jackson. And I'm going to tell you the reasons why. So when you look at Frank Jackson's game, let's talk about scoring first, okay? So far this season, Frank Jackson has had 9 games where he scored over 15 points. And when you look at Dennis Smith Jr., he's only had 1 game this entire season where he scored over 15 points. Now, this is not a bash Dennis Smith Jr. video. I like Dennis Smith Jr., but he's just not as good of a scorer as Frank Jackson is. In today's NBA game, it's about shooting, 3-point shooting, free throw shooting. When you look at Frank Jackson, he's a 40% three-point shooter and an 81% free throw shooter. Dennis Smith Jr., on the other hand, only shoots 35% from the 3 and 70% from the free throw line. Now, 35% for Dennis Smith Jr. is actually pretty high because you would expect it to be a lot lower because it feels like he misses a lot of jumpers. But the free throws, I just can't get down with. 70%, that's too low for a point guard because point guards are supposed to be really aggressive and they're supposed to get to the free throw line. And if he's getting to the free throw line and he's only making it 70% of the time, that's just too low for my taste from a point guard. So Frank Jackson fits in today's NBA game in terms of speed, 3-point shooting, and free throw shooting. He has a smarter IQ. Now, I know some people may want to argue on this point because Dennis Smith Jr. actually averages 3 assists, where Frank Jackson only averages 1. So you could try to make that argument. But from the eye test, from what I see when I watch these games, it feels like Frank Jackson just has a smarter, higher IQ than Dennis Smith Jr. does on the floor. It just feels like he's more assertive when it comes to decision making, whereas Dennis Smith, he's just a little bit more hesitant. It may be a play where he may or may not shoot the 3 or he may or may not attack the hole, where when you look at Frank Jackson, he's more assertive. He's sure of what he's going to do. His IQ allows him to quickly assess the situation on the floor, and he decides what he's going to do. Also, Dennis Smith Jr. is not as aggressive as Frank Jackson is. Now, some people may say, what are you talking about? Dennis Smith Jr., he's a slasher. But when you actually look at the numbers, Frank Jackson so far this season has shot 222 shots, whereas Dennis Smith Jr. has only shot 135 shots. So Frank Jackson is taking more shots. So he is more aggressive in that sense. Another thing that I want to mention is that Dwayne Casey has made it clear, at least to me, that he does not believe in Dennis Smith Jr. Even back to the Knicks coaches didn't believe in him because so far totally this season, he's played 23 games. But Frank Jackson, on the other hand, has played 34 games. And the last point that I want to make is that Frank Jackson has a higher trade value. So if we decide to re-sign Frank Jackson, we're going to get more. If we want to trade Frank Jackson in the future, we're going to have more opportunity to get more picks, more assets for Frank Jackson instead of Dennis Smith Jr. because I just feel like Dennis Smith Jr.'s value is not as high as Frank Jackson. In today's NBA game, he just doesn't really fit this game. The only argument that I guess you could make for Dennis Smith Jr. is the fact that we have a team option on him. And then when you look at Frank Jackson, he can become an unrestricted free agent. That is a little bit worrisome because if we have our eyes focused on Frank Jackson and we decide to let go of Dennis Smith Jr., we might lose both of them because Frank Jackson might just decide, hey, I balled out this season. I showed my stuff. Another team might offer him a big contract and he's up out of here. And then we let go of Dennis Smith Jr., so he's out of here too. That would be the worst possible scenario, but I hope that doesn't happen. That's why I'm saying the Pistons, Troy Weaver, I believe in Troy Weaver, should be aggressive this offseason and make sure immediately, as soon as possible, we will be able to re-sign Frank Jackson. And Dennis Smith Jr., I'm sorry. I'm not trying to say that he's a bad player, but he's just not as good as Frank Jackson. And we don't need 4 point guards on the roster with the possibility of another point guard in the NBA draft. So unfortunately, Dennis Smith is going to be the odd man out. And I like Dennis Smith Jr., but Killian Hayes, I like Killian Hayes more. Saban Lee, I like Saban Lee more. And Frank Jackson, I like Frank Jackson more than I like Dennis Smith Jr., so he's the odd man out. So let me know how y'all feel in the comment section below. Am I tripping? Am I, overthinking this? Should we keep 4 point guards on the roster? That sounds ridiculous to me, but if that's y'all opinion, convince me in the comment section below. What do y'all believe we should do with this point guard situation? Should we re-sign Dennis Smith Jr.? Should we re-sign Frank Jackson? Should we trade Dennis Smith Jr.? Like, what should we do? And also, I want to say to everybody who was in the live stream, thank y'all for the post game. It was Pistons versus Hornets. If y'all didn't watch it, it was a post game. I chilled out with a bunch of the subscribers. We chilled, had a good time, talked about basketball, football, our real life basketball skills, Transformers. We really just went all over the place and had a fun time. So I'm gonna be doing more live streams, and you all should make sure that you come to them because they're really fun. I answer all the questions that I can. I entertain y'all with the best of my ability, and we just have a fun time. So like this video, comment on this video, share this video. Thank y'all for 1K. I'm out.